welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go for a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. This episode, for some reason I keep trying to go back to this midweek episode. I don't know. The two intros are becoming a blur. This episode, I don't necessarily know what it's going to be called exactly, but it's kind of recent memories plus season 2 so far. Definitely season 2 so far, but the recent memories I'm not too sure about. This is stuff that I've had occur in the past sort of couple weeks since the end of season 1, and then that downtime in between season 1 and season 2, and then at the start of season 2 as well. So these are memories such as getting messages or, just anything to do with WoW in general that I've occurred in this time. As always, we have the weekly news for you, and this is the very first week where we have 2 world bosses. We have Strunran, who I think I said that perfectly first time. That's pretty impressive. It only took me an entire patch, so several months. Essentially, he is in... Oh god, now I've forgotten. He is the boss in Onaran Plains, the bottom right of Onaran Plains. And we have... oh god, it's another one to get used to. Zakali Elders. That's actually not too bad. These are located in the new zone, Zaralak Caverns. They are on the very far left underneath this big, giant shadow flame structure thing. It's a very cool place to have a world boss, and it's very weird because they're actually 2 bosses. They're 2 bosses, and they spawn quite far apart. It's kind of weird, I'm not going to lie. Because it feels like that they'll reset if you try and pull them together, so you can't cleave them down. It just seems like a bit of a weird one, but very cool bosses nonetheless, and especially where they are spawning makes it really, really cool. It's a real sort of raid boss like area. The bonus event for this week is Skirmish, so this is for anything to do with... I'm not sure if it actually applies to arenas, but rated arenas, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But Skirmish, essentially you get more honor, 50% more I believe, from doing these arena skirmishes. That was a nice way to actually gear a character right now, because there is a conquest cap currently in place, and the best gear that you can get for PvP right now is honor gear, so it's very much worth hopping into these arenas and doing the farming honor while it is a skirmish bonus event. Classic Ashran is your brawl for this week. It's basically normal Ashran, but it's Ashran from when it was in Warlords of Draenor. And the Warlords of Draenor Ashran was you could enter at any time via your capital city in Warlords of Draenor. You could literally just walk in at times. And essentially, it would only end if the opposing faction's leader was killed. So there is no reinforcements like you have in the normal Ashran when you queue into it today. It is very much you kill the opposition faction leader, and that is it. You just keep going, otherwise you don't stop at all. Raging, Storming and Tyrannical are your mythic affixes for this week. And as for Season 2, there are no season affix. This is the first season where there is no seasonal affix. I believe that there is something in place for this where they make it a bit more challenging. So you get your first affix at level 7 level 7 keystone. The second affix at level 14 or something. And then at level 20, it will be the final affix. But, it's a bit of a shake up and they're trying different things. So it'll be interesting to see. But Raging, when they get below 30%, they do 100% increased damage. You either want to burst them fast, kite them, or soothe them if you're a hunter, druid, anything like that can soothe. Storming, these are just little clouds that form around the mobs. They're very annoying for melee. Range don't really need to deal with them unless you're stacked on melee, but I don't know why you would be. So it's very simple, just sidestep them, very nice and easy. And Tyrannical, the bosses and the mobs that they spawn have more health and damage, so make sure that you bring a build in order to accommodate that. Incinerate is the spell that we will be looking at this week. Now, it sounds very boring, Incinerate. It sounds like, oh, it's not really changed much, but it has had a lot of balance changes throughout its years. Actually, more than I would have expected. More than most spells, actually, now that I think about it. So, Incinerate was added back in 2.0, back in Burning Crusade, 2006 that is, and it had one change in Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King. The BC one was crit chance is now being affected by the second rank of the Warlock Destruction talent, Devastation. This was simple, this was just a small little bug that they had to fix, essentially. In Wrath of the Lich King, when using Incinerate while having Backlash and Backdraft active, only Backlash will be properly consumed. So Backdraft is when basically it gives you a reduced time on your Incinerates, like cast time, and Backlash I believe is when you get like attacked. Yes, so it will consume the Backlash first before it would use the Backdraft, your increased time essentially, so that it doesn't time out your Backlash. It had a few changes in Cataclysm. The first being it now has a 40-yard range, up from 30. Now deals 500 to 550 damage, down from about 580 to 670. And an additional 120 to 140, down from 140 to 170. So it's just a slight nerf, essentially, that came with the range increase. And then it was further reduced, and this is by approximately 12%, it says. So, and again, another little nerf. This poor spell doesn't get much use, and yet it got nerfed. That's a bit rough. Shadow and Flame can now proc from Incinerate in addition to Shadow Bolt. Kind of makes sense because, well, Incinerate kind of was the filler spell instead of Shadow Bolt for certain specs, so it makes a lot of sense. In Mists of Pandaria, it had a lot of changes. It actually had 7? Yes, 7. Instant cast Incinerates generated by Backlash now correctly consume the buff. It deals 10% more damage. Fire and Brimstone version of Incinerate now deals the correct amount of damage. Fire and Brimstone, is that the green fire? I think it is. When was this one added? This one was added, it looks like in about 5.2. I'm pretty sure that's when Isle of Thunder was introduced. So, yeah, I would imagine that's what that's referring to. Fire and Brimstone, essentially, it's a talent somewhere. Yeah, it's a talent, actually. I don't think it's anything to do with changing the colour of the spell. Damage done has been increased by 10%. It got another little 10% increase. And then it was further increased by 5% 2 days later. And then a day later, it has a 15% chance to generate an additional Burning Ember. Burning Embers acted as soul shards for Destro locks, essentially. In Warlords of Draenor, it got a few changes. It had a new spell effect, which is really cool. That's where it because it used to just drag itself along the ground, but now it's actually quite nice looking. I don't know how to explain it. Incinerate's damage has been increased by 8% and then increased by a further 5%. So it's only been getting buffs since. And then Legion hit. Damage reduction or damage reduced by 18.46%. That's a very specific amount. Very, very specific. Incinerate damage increased to 190% of your spell power, was 170. Incinerate damage increased to 210% of your spell power, was 190. This was 10 days apart, them two buffs. And then Incinerate damage increased by 11% a month later, so it just kept getting better and better in Legion. And then the final Legion change that it had, Incinerate now generates 1 Soul Shard fragment, and now generates 2 Soul Shard fragments on a critical strike. This is how it is in the game currently. I'm pretty sure you need 10 Soul Shard fragments in order to create a Soul Shard. And Incinerate's mana cost was reduced by 16%. In Battle for Azeroth, you have 2 changes. It now deals, oh my god, why is it so specific? 58.225% of your spell power. Seems really specific for no reason whatsoever. And the damage increased to 64.1% of your spell power. And then finally, in Shadowlands, its mana cost got reduced by 25%. I don't think that was really needed. I don't think they really cared about the mana cost, did they? Yeah, Incinerate's a bit of a weird one. It has its nerfs and buffs and stuff, but I think a lot of the stuff that happened in Legion with the tweaking of damage is very tough to figure out, because in Legion, obviously, numbers were super high. We were in the millions. We were hitting for millions of damage. Some people had 5 billion damage. Not 5 billion, sorry. 50 million health. Somewhere around that line. And it's like, oh, Jesus, ridiculous. So yeah, you can understand them tweaking numbers of spells quite a lot in Legion. So let's get into the main point of the podcast. Essentially, I'll start off with Season 2. What is has there been any meta yet that has actually arisen in Season 2? From what I've gathered, I've only seen a day of it, a day or two's worth of it, as of recording this. I've done a couple sessions with my team, and it's been alright. It's not been bad. We play a really scuffed survival hunter boomy monk team. It's just for fun. It's very much just for fun, nothing more. We'll occasionally push for certain goals, certain ratings and stuff, but it is just to have fun, essentially, not too serious. So we're obviously on the lower end of what our comp would be, but from what we've come up against, there is a lot of warlocks, and more specifically, destruction warlocks. There have been a few demo warlocks, and I don't think I've fought a affliction warlock yet. Maybe one, actually. I think I fought one, and that was yesterday, so Wednesday. Yeah, it's not looking good in terms of if you're a melee. I would very much say that this is more going to lean towards a caster patch more than a melee. Now, being a Boomkin main, I'm very much up for this. I am so down to have a caster patch. You are looking at Season 1, which was Rogue Mage Priest for a little bit. You're looking at a lot of Destruction Warlocks were at the start of Season 1. But you're looking at more melee heavy cleaves, probably, monk or anything like that. You obviously have your TSGs, your Ret Warriors, your Windwalker Warriors, whatever. You have all of that. What's the other one? Turbo. Turbo is actually probably a very good pick right now in Season 2. It's a very strong pick. Enhancement Shamans are actually flying really under the radar, but they are actually very strong if you can utilize them, that is. So I would definitely say that a Turbo Cleave is very much up there, but I would say if you're looking at a meta, you're looking at more casters, Warlock, Ellie, Boomy Ellie, Shadow Play, stuff like that. Anything along them lines, even if you know what, no matter what, if you've got a Destro Warlock in there, you're meta. That's what I'll say. If you have a Destro Warlock in your comp, you're fine. You're completely fine. I would be very... what's the word? I'd be very not surprised. Unsurprised? Oh my god, I cannot think of the word. I would not be surprised if they nerfed Destro Warlocks by a tiny amount in the coming patches. I don't mind their damage. Their damage is somewhat fine. It's more their counterplay to certain things. So, Observer recently got a big buff. This Observer hits for 10% of your health for every harmful spell you use. Now, you think, okay, that's fine, just kill it. Firstly, it's got about 120k HP. Secondly, it can be healed. And thirdly, it's got quite a big range. So, and fourth, you also have to actually pump damage into it, like you're a burst almost into it. I play Boomy, and I have to pump at least 2-3 Star Surges into it if I get unlucky. And that is 30% of my HP. And that's not taking into account people healing it, like just where it's placed, because it's basically a zone control sort of thing. It's very rough to run into. I would say just nerf the health of it and see where Warlocks stand, because whenever they go up against a caster, it is a must pick. you are actually throwing the game, essentially, if you're not picking this Observer, from my honest opinion, because of how much it just controls the battlefield against other casters. It's absolutely ridiculous right now. Or make it so, kind of like Scythiend, you're not allowed to shield it anymore. Make it untargetable by heals. So at least, like, if you're killing it, it won't be able to be topped up constantly, because that, like, the more damage you pump into it, the more damage it does to you. So essentially, the priest just has to heal it. That's all. If the priest or the monk or shaman, whatever your healing like buddy is, if they're just healing your Observer and you're pumping 10 spells into it, it's done 100% of your health. And that's what your healer or that person's healer has had to heal, rather than just a small little blob floating in the sky, beaming you. It is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I would say if there's a meta that's going to form, it would be around Warlocks, Destro Warlocks especially. Turbo is very much a nice pick into the caster comps, though, because obviously you have grounding totems, you have a ranged kick with shear, you have a decurse, you have multiple things like that. So 2 very good comps right there for you. I would say, in terms of enjoyability for Season 2, I would say that it's definitely a mix-up to what the end of Season 1 was like. So end of Season 1, we had a Paladin rework. We all remember that Paladin rework, don't we? It was horrendously annoying because they were super overtuned when they came out. So we had a lot of Ret Warrior, Ret anything, essentially. And it's nice to switch up from, like, this one class for a while. The problem that they had in Shadowlands is that the final couple patches was all dominated by Rogue Mage Priest. Now, it didn't matter if it was Assassination Rogue, Sub Rogue, Outlaw Rogue was the go-to, though. And this is because everyone kind of favours more defensive, or the more tankier, the more passively tankier you are, because it's more, oh, we'll just sort of outlast you, more than glass cannon type of deal, where it's like, kind of like Brazil in football almost. You just want to outscore them. So in that regard, I think that, like, constantly switching in terms of the patches or the damage numbers for certain classes, like, play around with the damage numbers, play around with talents a bit more, and it means that it leads into another meta. I'm more than happy with it, because you're constantly having to adapt, and it's never stale. It's a never stale meta, and that means that it is very enjoyable, in my personal opinion, honestly. I'm guessing those who played Rogue Mage Priest and Shadowlands towards the end were very happy. But no, very much I'm on the side of do a load of changes, and we'll sort of play around with it and figure out what's meta, even if it's like for a couple weeks, because that spec might get nerfed quickly. But we'll always figure it out, and there will always be constant changes in terms of what people are playing. But as long as there's a lot of comps about, there's always jungle available, there is always RMP. RMP is still very much there. But you have caster comps now, you have a couple melee comps, Turbo is very good, like I said. As long as there's multiple and loads of these different comps that are viable, rather than just Rogue Mage Priest or like Ret Warrior, like every game in Shadowlands, it was Ret Warrior and then Rogue Mage Priest. Ret Warrior, Rogue Mage Priest, and it just got stale and boring. So I'm more than happy for them to keep chopping and changing it up, and I'm more than happy for Warlocks to, you know, have a little showing at the start of Season 2 again, because the only showing that they had was at the start of Season 1, and even then it was barely a showing at all. Boomkin is also one of these that is showing its actual, like, feathers, as it were, at the start of this season with the damage that it is bringing. But thing is, Boomy never needed more damage. The damage I thought was fine. It's more the survivability for Boomy. You're having to give up your damage to heal or to survive. Whereas if you look at Enhanced Shamans, they're giving up barely anything to actually heal. They'll use an instant cast healing surge to top them up, whereas I have to stand there and fully cast my regrowths. Yeah, that's kind of where the downfall of druids is, because you can't just heal instantly. You have to give up a load of your damage And at the moment, the boomy damage is very much your ramping damage. So the longer that you keep going, the more and more damage you will just eventually do, and they'll just flatline. The entire team will just flatline, essentially. But there's also been moments in between these seasons. In between Season 1 and Season 2 is obviously the off-season. The off-season is the introduction to the patch, where you can do loads of quests, you get certain items to craft like other pieces of gear, such as the Shadow Flame Spark or whatever it's called. But during the off-season, you can still do arenas, you can still do all the rated stuff, but it doesn't really count. You'll see your rating go up or down, but it doesn't count because everything is locked. Where you got locked at the end of Season 1 is what rewards you would earn for that season. So if you were 2,700 and the rank 1 cutoff was 2,701 and Season 1 ended, it will go grey. You could still play, and if you went over 2,701, you would not get that rank 1 title. You would simply be able to show that you could have done it, I guess. But during this downtime, people are still looking for arenas. And there's been a couple of things that I've found out. That people, no matter what time of the season it is, are super toxic. Just for no reason. Like, this is probably a pet peeve of mine, but why be toxic in the game? There's literally no point. Whether it be through just simple leveling or dungeons, PvP, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, obviously, we had a lot of balance changes with the latest patch 10.1, and during the off-season, a lot of people just test out stuff. You know, do some arena quests, test out some talents, stuff like that. So, this is what people are signing up for. They're kind of just having a chill session and all that. I join a game, or I join a looking for group, and it says, like, looking for 2.2k EXP, whatever, you know, all that stupid stuff. And I'm like, I really don't care because it's off season. And I join, I say that I'm whatever experience I am, and then I get an invite. The priest says BRB, need toilet, that's fine. So I'm chatting with the paladin that I would have been queuing with. The paladin was Rhett, and the priest was Disc or something. The Disc is the leader of the group. Essentially, I'm talking to the Rhett, we're literally just chilling. He seemed like a very nice guy. I was, loving the conversation. He's just like, oh, I'm just looking to do the quest. Have you ever played this comp before? And I'm like, no, not really, but it's kind of the same as Demon Hunter, Boomy, just I'll root beam on the Hodge, bash CC on the Hodge, whatever. And he's like, yeah, it's all cool, it's all cool. So we're just talking, literally just talking. Out of nowhere, you've been removed from the group. And I'm like, what? So I ask the priest what happened, and he simply just puts, you're boosted, you ridiculous, like, get good. And I'm sat there like, what? It makes no sense in my head. So obviously this guy's check PvP'd me and seen that I've gotten, like, glad in 1 or 2 seasons, essentially. And this season was the season in Shadowlands where inflation was quite high. Quite high. Rank 1 cutoff was probably like 3.7, somewhere like that. So I got glad. I got about 2,700 around that bit. And essentially what has happened is he's looked at it, saw that I have, like, list or whatever it is, like, throughout the entirety of my character, and then saw this one thing and thought, nope, boosted. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people that were boosted in this season, purely on the basis because why wouldn't you? It's basically free gold with how inflation was working in Shadowlands at that point. And there was always a team that I would come across when they were boosting. It was a Windwalker Monk and a Prot Paladin. Annoying. Absolutely annoying. But essentially, yeah, he says that I'm boosted. And I actually do calmly just explain to him, okay, firstly, that season was super inflated. It was really, really inflated. It was about 3.7 rank 1 cut-off, and I made it to 2.7. If you were to look at the current leaderboard now, Like at the very end of season 1, and to look at that current leaderboard in season 2 of Shadowlands, I have literally not moved. I have literally not gone down at all, like in terms of rankings. 1900 was top 5,000 in like EU at the end of season 1. That's how deflated season 1 was. It's absolutely crazy to think about that. But essentially, like, he wasn't having any of it. You can't reason with these people. He just simply, he spam messaged. He wasn't like a massive paragraph. It was like 2 words, enter, 2 words, enter. And he did this for about 5 or so messages. But it was basically just saying, no, clearly boosted, what the hell, or what the fuck are you doing? All of that stuff. And it's like, and then he just like says bye and ignores. And it's like, what? I'm so confused. And then the Paladin just messages saying, I have no idea why you got removed. And I just have a chat with him. And that's all. Like, it's so weird. You have someone who's so chill. And he's literally saying, like, this is off season. Who cares? Like, literally, who cares? So you have someone so chill in the Paladin. And then you have the Priest who's like, oh my god, my rating in off season matters so much. I want to get rank 1 off season. Like, what? You're absolutely mental for thinking that. And the thing is, I think about it now, and I always think arenas and PvP is very much on the mental side. I've always said this. If you can mentally win your battle and not get annoyed or agitated by PvP, you have a more likely chance of winning than you do going into a game thinking, oh my god, that loss was awful, like my teammate should have saved me or anything like that. You immediately drop your chances to up to about 50%, like, or you have about a 50% chance of winning. Think of it like this, when you enter an arena. The comp that you're playing against probably gives you a bit of a downgrade, like 40% to 60 in their favour. You can still beat this comp. If you go into that game with a mentality of like, no, we got this, it doesn't really matter, just GG, go next, you probably bump that up to 45, something like that. If you go into it thinking, no, there's no chance, my healer should have saved me, what the hell are they doing, this is ridiculous, immediately down to 20%. Because your mindset is not in that game. Your mindset's still on the last game. And the last game doesn't matter. You're not getting shadow bolted or demonic tyranted from the last game, are you? No, you're getting chaos bolted in this one. That's what you got to look out for, not the tyrant from last. It is ridiculous. I have many different stories like this, but I've just seen it is getting on a bit. So I'll tell you one more. I will tell you one more. And this one happened very recently and is actually quite funny. I'm actually really... it just shows like the mentality of some people in this game and how childish some people can be. So PvP, you enable PvP for questing. I've forgotten it. World PvP? Yeah, it's World PvP, but enlisted. You're just enlisted. You know what it is, where you get the extra 3 talents and you're in a PvP like open world rather than a PvE. Now, I went to Brackenhide Hollow, just scouting kind of things. I was seeing about getting a friend like 1 level, and there's a few packs that I can do, essentially. But I'm always on the lookout for World PvP, because why wouldn't I be? I'm in like a PvP server, or server essentially, and I love to just PvP. It helps, keep me up to date with my class and get better and all of that good stuff. So I spot a couple people in Brackenhide Hollow. It's a tank and a demon hunter or something. Swoop down and start fighting them. Now, me and my level 69 monk or something that I'm with, like my mate, and we deal with them relatively quickly. Obviously, it takes a while for us to kill the druid tank, I believe it was, but we end up killing them. No, there was actually 3. There was a monk as well, but obviously I was expecting to like thorns, and they didn't have PvP trinkets on and stuff like that. So we kill them, and then we start doing our pull. So it's like, okay, this is fine. And then I get a message from a mage, and this mage is clearly getting a boost from them. And it's like, if he was to message me, would you mind not killing them as I'm paying for a boost, and it would take a little bit of time, and I'll be like, oh, sure, no worries, like, completely my fault, sorry about that. But the very first message that got sent was, what the fuck are you doing, you dog? And it's like, oh, well, you're a charmer, aren't you? Like, what do you think the kind of response would be to that? Like, you can insult me all you want, but because the way that you approach this situation, I'm now just going to camp them. Like, and that's because of the way that you've conducted yourself. I'm not going to simply go, oh my God, my apologies, because you called me a dog or and just swore at me. No, I'm obviously going to sit there and camp them because they're awful and all they were doing was boosting. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. If he went about it in a completely different way, I would have literally just said, oh, okay, no worries, completely sorry, I understand. But it's his attitude towards it, and it's people's attitude towards, like, anything in WoW that kind of annoys me. It is a real pet peeve. It is simply, if you're nice to someone, then they can possibly show it back. They might not do it, but then it just shows their true colours, essentially. But if you're going to go up to them, call them a dog and swear at them because I killed some horde that were in world PvP, how is that my fault? How am I meant to know that they're boosting you? Like, what? I thought they were just here for a world quest or something, who cares? But now that you've said that and have been rude to me, I am 100% going to camp them because I don't want you getting any satisfaction now. Yeah, it's one of them things. So eventually, he's just throwing loads of slurs at me and stuff like that afterwards, and I couldn't give two shits, to be honest. The funny thing about it is they eventually had to turn off their war mode. That's it, war mode. I found the words. They had to turn off their war mode. So, in effect, I won just by saying very few words to this guy, and he lost because he actually just didn't conduct himself in a decent manner, like a human being. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So he's getting less XP because he's not in war mode. He's actually got less talents. People boosting him have less talents to utilize. So, some of these things and some people that you find in the game are absolutely ridiculous. And I have a few more, which I can probably do in another episode because I'll be ending it soon. But I have a few more stories that I'll pile up and obviously make in an episode by themselves. But yeah, this is in a couple weeks, let alone how many I've had over the years. It's absolutely ridiculous, to be honest. But that is it for this. Oh my God, my brain can function. I'm still thinking about that mage. Just what he was really going for it. But yeah, that is the end of this week's episode. Thank you all very much for listening, as always. Do check out the Patreon as well as Twitch and YouTube. We also have started up a support for the Pig and Whistle Tales. You can find it in the links below. It would really show your appreciation for the podcast. It would really help it to keep going and keep on top of the weekly episodes. So please check it out. It will be a massive help to the show itself. But thank you all very much for listening. Go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.